Ready to go.
And just like that, here we are. We got a great group of people here today to talk about.
Best ever.
We're gonna spend a lot of time talking about two things. I want to talk about my goat hunt in Alaska. We had a film come out just this week on the Meateater YouTube channel, and I want to give some behind the scenes. I have some props.
Oh.
And I kind of have a big story to tell
Okay.
that the film just couldn't tell.
Okay.
Man, as much as you would think that the medium of video would be the primary way to tell a story, it is not at all. Video is all hype and fluff.
Whoa.
Writing and podcasting is the way you tell a story.
Eat your
Wow.
vegetables,
What do you think, Malachi?
everyone.
I think you could throw in storytelling,
Well, I mean, but in what form?
audio, just
Audio.
talking. I guess podcasts. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I'm not 63.
Sometimes when I'm talking
Well-
to older people, I tell them we have an internet radio program.
Yeah. I've explained it to many people that have been on beargrease. It's kind of like a radio show, but it's on the internet and you can listen to it anytime. But so we made this big video about my goat hunt, and I'm going to talk about that. But secondly, we're going to talk about a podcast that I think when I heard what our production team at Meateater finished up, like me and Josh work on the nuts and bolts and content. Like we script beargrease in our minds, and then we basically give our design to the production team that makes it.
Yeah.
And so, we hear kind of with imperfection what we think it's going to sound like. And then when we hear it, it's like, it like pops. And I feel like this is one of the best beargrease of all time, period. That's my personal, I just loved it.
I like the name of it. It kind of matches that. The Incredible Life of Ellis Bell. It kind of felt like a Hollywood, like one of those
Yeah.
fantastical.
Extraordinary. It was extraordinary.
The Extraordinary
Yeah.
Life of Ellis Bell.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about that. So we have Dr. Misty Newcomb. So great to see you. Beautiful scarf.
Thank you. My daughter got this for me on
Oh,
a recent
okay.
international
Great.
trip.
We have Josh Landbridge, Spielmaker.
Here,
Great to see you, Josh.
Yep.
Me and Josh rode 25 miles on mules the last 2 days, hog hunting for
Josh-
another day.
And for a guy who doesn't ride mules, that's a lot.
For
Well-
another day. This saddle, don't for a second, which camera? Don't for a second think that this saddle is just for show. Colt George made that saddle for me in Wyoming, and there was a hog laid over that.
Yep. There's blood on the other
There's
side.
blood on this thing.
Glad we
Yeah,
can't smell it.
this was 25 miles in the backcountry 2 days ago, and then
Riding
today,
mules, honestly, places I didn't think you could ride anything.
yeah,
So,
we went to some woolly places.
Josh
That
got.
but hey guys, that's a different story.
Okay,
Sorry,
Not going to talk about
goats and the extraordinary life of Mr. Ellis. Got Bear John Newcomb.
Yep. Glad to be here.
Bear's got some big films coming out
Yeah.
from Meateater. Me and Giannis
Yeah.
Putelis have a constant years long back and forth about semantics between whether what we make is films or episodes. I make films.
right.
Giannis says, Clay, you don't make films. You make episodes.
Episode
so-
what
of
about, like-
what?
I mean, like when we make
would
these
have to
Meateater, basically anything that goes on Meateater, because Giannis has stuff on Meateater, I have stuff on Meateater. I say, great film, Giannis, like when on his stuff, and he goes, Clay, I don't make films. That was just an episode.
I feel like his stuff is episodes, your stuff is films.
Whoa.
Except the Bear
Oh.
Grease Road
Thanks,
Show.
Bear.
Whoa.
My point exactly. I said, Giannis, I'm an artist.
See, I determine it by time.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay.
An episode is like 20 minutes to 45 minutes.
Okay.
Anything longer than 45 minutes is a film.
Well, okay.
Uh-oh.
Then I make
I think
episodes.
that's a legitimate claim. I honestly think that's a legitimate claim.
It is.
What Malachi saying?
Yeah.
21 to 41.
It's all about the genre you're inside of, because like all these, like the Yeti short films are like 8
Yeah.
minutes long, and they call them films. It actually is it's semantics that revolves around the artistic quality of the said thing, like its intent. It's kind of like, hey, are we grilling burgers or are we making steaks? We making an episode or are we making a film?
Okay.
So me and Giannis have this, and I call it films. Giannis is an artist. He is literally
He is.
an artist.
He is.
So,
And
but
a heck of
Bear,
a great guy.
He is. I wish he could be on the Bear Grease
Yeah.
Render. Bear has multiple films coming out in the next couple weeks.
The debut films.
Debut films that he's in that are going to be really great. We have Dr. Malachi Nichols here.
Hello, hello.
Hey, me and Josh were talking about your history on the Bear Grease podcast.
Yeah, I'm an OG.
You
The
literally.
OG.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Were you on the
OG.
first Bear Grease render?
I believe like I was on the first like 6, maybe.
I think he was.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That
And-
check just cleared, so I'm back. I'm back. Back, baby. That check just cleared. I just got the email from
We
the
are
bank.
heavily weighted with doctors today.
We are heavily weighted with
40%
doctors.
of the crew here have legitimate doctorates.
Dr. Malachi Nichols, Dr. Newcomb.
Yep.
And then,
Some of us have
I-
illegitimate
Yeah.
doctorates.
yeah.
That'd be Clay. He wants to put himself in here with us and say, I'm a doctor. He went through the Gary Newcomb school.
Well, I mean, I do have a PhD in the Gary Newcomb School of Hunting Hard Knocks.
And if anybody has that,
Yeah.
it's you.
That's all I got, though. That's all I got. No, it's good to have you, Dr. Nichols.
Yeah, good
Very
to be
good to
here.
have you. So, tell us what your doctorate's in.
I have a PhD in education policy.
Education policy. What does that mean?
I can essentially, I'm trained to be able to evaluate educational programs and educational policies and give color to the black and white numbers around research.
Nice. And you're a squirrel hunter.
I am a squirrel hunter. It's real serious.
You and your
My
boys.
boys are squirrel
A
hunters.
multi-generation.
The other day, I have to tell this. I have to tell the story. So we have like a yearly, New Year's Day squirrel hunt with the Newcombs, and this is year 2 for my boys. And we go out squirrel hunt. They love it. I took my youngest. He's 2 this year. Oldest is 4. So like a week later, after the squirrel hunt, we're like preparing for like family golf, like going out to play golf.
Which is a big deal. In
It's
your
a big
family.
deal. Once a week, we usually play golf as a family, my wife included. My oldest looks at me and goes, "Dad, you know squirrel hunting is funner than golf."
Oh!
He said that to me.
Oh!
Get in the car right now. Get in the car right now. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. True story.
Really?
True story. Dad, you know squirrel hunting is funner than
I
golf.
love it.
Wow.
So we only did
That-
it. We only did squirrel hunting for 2
Man.
years.
That is how
That was it.
hunting went
Yeah,
to
that was
die.
it. Just wrap that up.
Man, I would make
It
a
was fun while it
shirt.
lasted.
I would make a shirt.
Squirrel hunting is funner than golf. Dad,
Quote
squirrel hunting is
with his
funner
name
than golf.
underneath it. Oh my gosh, that is funny.
True story.
I think you've been holding that back from me.
I have.
you knew that it would cause a
I
little
knew
too
it
much.
would, it would like increase
flame.
the level of influence
Uh,
of hunting inside of my children's life. My boys have camo before I've had camo. That's how serious it is.
yeah.
That's how serious it is.
Wow. This is major. I had no idea. Well, I'll tell you. I'll handle this responsibly. I may pitch in a few bones to the golf. They'll be
Yeah, yeah.
when I'm
appreciate
talking to
it.
him. I'll be
Appreciate it.
like, "Hey, golf's pretty fun too with your dad." And they'll be like, "You sure, Clay?"
What's your angle?
That is super funny. So this week on the YouTube Meateater channel, we came out with my Alaskan goat film, Mountain Goat, which is I was in Alaska in mid-August of 2024 with my friend and guide David Bennett. David is his business is called Stykeen Guide Service, and I've known David for like over a decade through bear hunting magazine stuff. So we kind of had this relationship. But he was the guy I went wolf trapping with a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Last winter. And David is he is just a bad to the bone Alaskan guy. I could tell stories about David that I'll tell you one. He multiple times he's a veteran bow hunter. And he's killing Boone and Crockett animals with his bow up there in Alaska. And he wanted to kill a Boone and Crockett caribou. And he flew into this place, and for the Super Cub, all that they could carry was, X amount of gear in him and make it out there and then make it back. And so he had limited amount of gear he could take. Went on this solo hunt, carried 12 days worth of food and gear. That's all he had. but he planned to stay just like as long as it took. So on day 12, when he ran out of food, he just like he stayed out there without food and just killed grouse and ate berries and drank water out of the creek for 9 days and finally killed this huge caribou.
Oh.
I mean,
That is wild.
when I
What
when
was he killing?
what's that?
What was he killing to eat daily?
Grouse.
Grouse.
Yeah, he was shooting grouse with his bow and cooking grouse over a fire. And he for 9 days, that's what he did. And I mean, he'll tell you that story and not even think it's cool, And he does some really elongated moose hunts, like floating like 150 plus miles solo in a raft down rivers and after big moose. I mean, the guy, he just every time you're around him, he'll just tell you a story that you just are like, are you kidding? But he's 57, lived in Alaska his whole life. His entire life has been a commercial fisherman, guide, and professional trapper. And, on this mountain goat hunt, mountain goats, Malachi, live in the roughest, wildest places in North America, like, period. They live, it's like there's this like trophic scheme of where animals live based on elevation and food and whatnot.
Right.
And the mountain goats just learned, their strategy is to live in the places where predators can't go because it's just too rough and cliffy. And so they're living in these like wild places. And I started that story to tell something else. Essentially, when you go hunt a mountain goat, you're going into the roughest spots in North America to get them. David Bennett's is 12 years older than me, and he was in better shape than me. And I was working pretty hard to be in shape. And I had some people ask me like what I did. And I'm not like a ultra athlete or anything, but I do work to stay in shape. And essentially for 6 months I was pounding the Stairmaster
With a pack.
with a pack on, like a weighted pack. Just trying to build up my legs,
Yeah, I'd see you in the gym with like a camo backpack that like has probably hauled out like a bunch of dead animals, and you're like on the Stairmaster, like walking
with all
around.
these old men beside me.
Well, I think I would like to. It actually became a subject of family memes. We send them around
we
because
start taking pictures.
the gym we go to is not like a back hunters gym, and so like there's all these people there. They've got their fancy gear, and then there's Clay running around with this nasty old backpack. It's pretty funny to us, and so we started sending the memes, and we have our own little. Clay doesn't know it. There's a little thread without him, and we have all sorts of funny statements about. It was
We're
very
supposed to tell them.
very flattering. I think like just about being.
But now I
understanding the
have a
assignment.
weighted vest.
It's true.
It looks like a SWAT team.
It's like
thing.
it's supposed to be there at the gym.
Yeah.
We're in our weighted vest era.
You didn't just look like a homeless guy that wandered in.
Yeah.
Epic gym fails.
Yeah. So I often wondered what people thought.
Just your kids.
I mean, they're like,
Oh, I'm sure other people thought
I had a conversation. One guy at the gym was like, "That's a sweet backpack," and I could tell he was kind of like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I'm actually going on a hunt in Alaska, and so I put weight in this thing and training, trying to get where I can walk up mountains." And he was like, "For real?" And and he
There's
was
a
like,
guy
"What
in my
are you
neighborhood.
hunting?"
I can tell he's going on a trip because he's been hiking with a backpack all around.
You need
like,
to ask him
climbing
where
hills.
he's going.
I know. I need to ask him.
Yeah. And I said, "I'm hunting mountain goats." And he was like, "What? What's a mountain goat?" And, I told him, like, I don't know if he thought I was like, not like, might have thought I was the crazy guy that was just like making stuff up.
Yeah.
But anyway, next time I see him, I'm going to be like, "Hey, you want to watch this film?"
Put this in front of your Stairmaster.
So the mountain goat. But David is just an incredible guy. There was a little part on the film where it kind of did like a bio piece on David, and it was interesting. He when he was a senior in high school, he graduated high school, and he had a commercial fisherman take him back into a cove and leave him for 3 months with about 100 traps, and and he stayed out there for 3 months and trapped. He's a
Holy smokes,
he's a
that's
heck of a
legit.
guy. Oh,
Yeah.
he's a heck of a guy. And so my strategy on the film or on the hunt was to try to kill a mountain goat with a bow, which to me would probably have been the most challenging hunt that I would have done. And Frank Noska is a veteran, probably one of the most decorated bow hunters in the world. You won't see him on films and stuff, but he's done the Grand Slam, the archery world Grand Slam, killing all 27 big game species with a bow for sure twice, and probably working on his next grand. I mean, he's like one of the Michael Jordans of bow hunting, guy that you wouldn't see on any films. I don't know that there's a film about Frank Noska, but I had seen an
Was there
article.
an episode?
There might be an episode about Frank. There was I saw him in a picture one time of him with a goat, and he was dressed in a fully white suit with little ears on his hat. And so I had Josh Landbridge, Spielmaker,
Oh,
make me a goat hat. And I messaged Frank Noska and I said,
Boone
hey,
and Crockett.
yeah, I'm a monster. Our biggest mistake was making those horns that big, which was, Frank. I messaged Frank and I said, hey, tell me about decoying these goats. So Malachi, you dress up like a goat.
I don't think
And-
everyone dresses up like a goat, do they?
No,
Okay, so
Just Clay
So
and
this was
me and
his
Frank.
Clay and
selection.
Frank.
Oscar.
But these goats are in such remote places that anything, when they see something white, they just think it's a goat. And so I asked Frank about it, and he gave me some advice. He said, when you see goats that you can't stalk using terrain, typically you would use terrain to stalk the goats. Like you'd get behind rocks, or the hill would roll and they'd be down at the bottom and you could peek over and shoot. But it's so open in some places, you can't stalk goats because like they just can see you. You know, you're 100 yards away and they're just like standing there looking at you. So that's when you use a decoy suit. And he said, just start moving towards them. And if they see you and act nervous, he said, just stop. He said, just lay down for an hour. Just wait. And eventually they get okay with you. And you just kind of move towards them and just evaluate like their response to it.
Right.
So that's part one. I wanted, and so me and Josh made this, which this is a leafy suit, but we spray painted it white, and so it has y'all want me to put this on, don't you?
oh yeah, of course we do.
We spray painted it white. I'll just put it on the top. So there's the bottoms, but this is a First Light leafy suit that Josh actually spray painted, and it made the perfect, like textured. Most of the guys wear like
a
painters,
Tyvek-
like a
Tyvek's,
Tyvek painter's suit, which they work good. But let me tell you what works better. This.
I'm surprised we didn't catch you in the gym wearing that too.
Well,
Yeah.
Before I
I,
got kicked out.
I definitely have pictures of Clay. There's a picture that I was going to meet someone. We were going to a coffee shop to do some work, and I said I'll be there in 20 minutes. And anyway, I think Clay was going to come and he was going to drop me off and go do something else. And I texted her a picture of Clay talking to River and her friends in this outfit. And I just texted her that picture because they were all eating dinner at our house. And I came down the stairs with my, all my stuff. And I look, and there's Clay dressed in this outfit. We're supposed to leave. He's dressed in this outfit, and he's got his hands up like this, impersonating, I guess, a scared mountain goat. I don't know. He's got his hands up like this. And so I just took a picture and I sent it to her. And I said, hey, I came downstairs to this, so I think I'm going to be a little late. He's pretty proud of that suit.
I am. It worked really great. And so on day 4, Malachi, of this hunt, and I don't know, y'all cue me up if there's, I just kind of wanted to give a behind the scenes look at the hunt. A lot of people ask questions about the goat suit, but I mainly want to talk about the recovery. So Bear, if you have questions.
Hey, can I
Got it.
add something about the recovery that happened before you left?
Okay.
So before Clay left, we were at church, and our pastor said, Clay, let's all pray for Clay, pray for his safety while he's out there. And I was like,
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing to say. He's never said that before on any of Clay's trips.
and he's a veteran hunter.
And he's a veteran hunter, yeah. And maybe Clay wasn't even, I can't remember if Clay was there or if he'd already left, but he's like, okay, Clay's on that mountain, go ahead. Everyone this week, y'all just be praying for Clay's safety. And I was just like, well, that's interesting. I mean, that kind of stuck in my mind. And then we hear this story of this retrieval.
So on the goat, Malachi, I was able to get within 70 yards by using terrain. So I mean, you could have just had like normal camo on and got to within 70 yards. I really needed to be inside. I wanted a 40-yard shot, but really needed to be inside of 50 for being comfortable with a bow. And so at 70 yards, I essentially just stood up in my goat suit and just walked straight towards him without anything between us. And the goat never directly even looked at me. They have eyes on the side of their head like a prey animal, and so they can see like way further behind them than we can. And the goat would just like turn its head just a little bit. I could tell it was looking at me out of the corner of its eye, but never even directly like looked at me. And basically I just walked into 40 yards with this hat on or walked into 45 yards. And I was just like, this is it. I mean, this is as close as I need to be. And drew back, shoot the goat. The goat, when you shoot an animal with archery equipment, they typically, they don't go far, but they run.
Yeah.
You don't just drop them. The goats are always within running distance of some terrible, nasty, cliffy, rocky stuff. That's their escape strategy. Like if a wolf had come up there, if a grizzly, like they're always like not far from being to something crazy. This goat was out in the middle of what looked like a pasture. It was real steep, but it was, I mean, you could have seen this goat for like, well, we saw the goat from a long ways away. It was like, well, there he is right out in the middle of that face. And then we got in real close and I stalked around to the goat. And when I shot it, it went right towards the cliffy stuff that was right there. And it you can see it in the film. It beds down on this big snowbank and it's still alive. I put another arrow in it and it just slides off the mountain. Just goes down. And I can't see it. We go down and the goat is like 150 feet down, wedged underneath this huge block of ice. And again, I'm not even going to describe it. You can just watch the film. And I can get down when we finally see I can get down fairly safely to within about 15 feet of the goat. And David is there. Dirt Myth, the cameraman, legendary cameraman, Garrett Dirt Myth Smith is there. And this is what I couldn't say on the film, is that David said, guys, this is not a goat that we can recover, essentially. And
just because of the precariousness of the situation.
Yeah. And he warned us, he said, guys, this is the kind of stuff that when you fall, they don't recover your body. He said that to us. He was just like, because he knew me and Dirt were very motivated to get that goat. And he was doing his job of just saying, he said, that happens in goat hunting. Sometimes you shoot a goat that you don't recover because it just falls into the abyss.
Yeah.
And that's terrible. Like that in hunting, like there's such a high priority put on recovering the animal and taking the meat out. I mean, like, period. That's what we all want to do. And so we're very motivated to get this goat. We can see it, and it's lodged up under this ice. And David, and again, at this point, we weren't even thinking about filming. I mean, the film is like, we're not even making a film anymore. We're trying to survive. Dirt's camera is like way up on the mountain, and here we are down here, having this little discussion. While in Dirt, basically, well, I get down, and there's like this little shelf about as big as a car hood that I'm very safe on. But I had to climb down 150 feet through this little drainage. You can see it on one of my You can see it on the film. It doesn't look near as precarious as it was. Josh is a skier, and he knows that when you take ski videos, they always look.
Yeah, you think I just skied down something crazy steep, and then you see the video, and it's like, oh, a toddler could have walked across that. It's not true.
This took every bit of everything I had to get down to here, but I was safe, and I felt like I could get back up. That's the problem with this kind of stuff, is you might be able to go down something, but you got to come back up it. And so I'm sitting there, see the goat, Dirt's here, and Dirt Myth is he is a savage of a man. Dirt's probably like my height, probably like 5'10" I don't know, and
That's pushing it.
but and he's a veteran rock climber. Steve Ranella calls him a world-class hiker. He's just strong. He's raised on a ranch in Montana, and it's just an incredible guy. And Dirt Dirt's brother is a professional rock climber, and Dirt has done some trips that just will blow your mind about rock climbing. So he knew his way around rocks. We had one little bitty rope, and Dirt says, "Hey, I think I can get to that goat and put a rope on its horns." And he said, "Here's what you do, Clay." He said, "You stay up here on this flat spot and belay me off of," belay means put a kink in the rope off of a rock. And he's like,
To use as a brake.
yeah. And so he ties this little nylon rope like around his waist in a special knot. And he's not putting his weight on the rope. The rope is just like safety. Like if he falls, then all his weight would be on it. And I would then be the one holding it. And the belay rock is not good. Like it's rounded. And so I keep saying, Dirt, this rock, I said, what if the rope slips over the top? And he said, man, if you just keep pressure on it, it won't. He just understood the physics of it. He's like, the smallest amount of pressure is going to keep it from slipping over. And I'm just like, okay, man. And you see it in the film. I say, Dirt, if you have any reservations about doing this, don't do it. And while he's like tying it on, he says, "Oh, I have reservations."
Yeah.
and wild. And what you can't see in the film is that like this is like the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. I mean, for real. Like no acting, no, like we weren't. It was just I was petrified.
What's the time frame like from second shot to like him putting on the rope?
2 hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
To
then
get
him,
down there and get set up.
and him coming back up. What's the time?
I mean,
do you even know?
2.5 hours, 3
Yeah.
hours. It was
Okay.
like probably a 3 hour window.
Okay.
And in the film, it's like 4 minutes.
Yeah.
So it's like this build up. There was a
Yeah.
lot of us talking about it with David, like how are we going to get down there, and him. Okay, the other thing that he did that he would tell us later is that he
David.
he in-reached his
Mhm.
his wife who was back home and said,
David did this.
David said, stay by the phone, stay by your phone, don't leave the house, and have the Coast Guard on, just like look up not the Coast Guard, look up the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard. That's what, because he said, look up their number and just be ready. He said, don't leave the house until you hear from me. Stay by your phone. David was worked up about it, but David also, he trusted Dirt. He trusted us to not do something stupid.
Right.
And so this we would all learn later, you know. And so Dirt shimmies down and gets down. And what you can't tell in the film, and there's just no way to describe it, is that goat, if it had not lodged right under that ice and that rock, it would have tumbled 800 feet. And you can't see it. It looks like it just kind of like gradually slopes down. But I told Misty, it wasn't like a vertical face like Wile E. Coyote, like if you'd have jumped, you'd have just been in the air. It was one of these deals where you would have fallen and you would have been dead within 50 feet. But you would have just went, bah, bah, bah. But you would have ended up 800 feet down. Like zero chance of survival.
Wow.
Are you going to tell about like what it sounded like?
Yeah.
Oh,
So Dirt gets down and ropes the goat. And when he does, it's just like, holy cow, he did it. This wasn't on film because I'm belaying. Like the part of the film that is on that you do see is just when I had a second to just film with my phone. Dirt, when he went down and I'm like full scale pulling the slack out, like I'm putting pressure on him just a little bit. He had his foot on the rock and he would kick into the ice bank and get a foothold and then like jump down. I mean, he was like doing some super technical stuff. And he finally gets down, and once he's like under the ice, like he's kind of safe because he can kind of brace up against the ice and the rock. And he gets the rope on the goat. I tighten the rope up on the goat. Can't budge it. Like, can't even budge it. He grabs the goat by the horns and yanks it out of the ice. I mean, just like brute adrenaline strength. He yanks it out of the ice, and I pull the slack out of the rope, and I'm holding it. And he climbs back up and like holding on to the rope. And me and him both pull the goat. And it's too heavy. We get it halfway up this little face, and we're just like, can't do it. And so I belay the goat. The goat's hanging on the side, and I say, Dirt, we've got to gut the goat. We got to get his guts out. Like, we can't get him out. And Dirt actually said, okay, do you think you can get it now that the goat's up a little closer? And I just said, Dirt, I can't.
And for this, I'm very proud of Clay.
I just said, Dirt, there's no way. I can't do it.
You tried for a second, didn't you?
No.
Okay.
I mean, and he said, no problem. He said, I'll do it. Give me your knife. So the goat is hanging on this cliff face, like probably like 8 feet from where it was. What's that?
Stand up next. When you have an animated part, stand up.
Okay. The goat is hanging on this cliff face, probably 8 feet from where it was lodged, and we've pulled it up. So Dirt goes back down there and is standing here, ice sheet here, cliff face behind him. I'm up there, and he guts this goat like it's hanging from a tree limb. And when he guts the goat, I get butterflies in my stomach telling the story. The guts just like fall out, just like they would if you were skinning a deer up in a tree. Mm-hmm. And the guts confirmed the physics of what we believed would happen. Those guts just went. I mean, it's not like he had to like kick them. The guts just went just off the side of the mountain. Dang. And it was just like this little water chute, you know? But now the goat weighs like probably 30 pounds less. He shimmies back up. He did it. He put the rope over his shoulder, and I'm just kind of like scrambling to just grab whatever I can. And he just like takes off, and we worked together, but he did the most of it. Pull this goat back up on this little, hood car-sized shelf perched up on this mountain. And I mean, we were just like, we just hugged, and you could see the celebration.
Yeah.
What's not on the celebration that I've told many people, anybody that would sit long enough to listen, like you lovely people, when he got back up there, I wept like a child. I mean, not because of the dang goat. I mean, some people cry, right. It wasn't a celebration that I got the goat. But
just a sense of relief.
I just, raw emotion.
Yeah.
Just like, I grabbed his hands and we prayed, and I thanked God that Dirt was safe. And I mean, I'm serious. I just bawled. And I mean, there's no video of that. And we were, for the most part, out of the woods, sorta. And I mean, and then it took another hour. We processed the goat right there on the mountain, had our bags, we deboned it, took everything out. And then we had to get out. And that was a challenge. I had been in this suit sitting in basically water for 2.5 hours. That little rock shelf just had like a trickle of water coming out, and I had to sit in it to belay. And so like I'm wet on the backside. The wind is blowing. It's cold, and I was shaking from cold and from just nerves.
Adrenaline.
Yeah.
And then we got to go back up, and I got to carry meat. And a couple of times on the way up, I kind of just like froze and panic, and you can see my legs shaking in one part of the film. But it's like, so we get the goat out. Everything's fine.
End of story. Everybody lived happily ever after.
Needless
And-
to say, we baked dirt a pretty good apple pie from the Newcomb farm.
Yeah. And no, it was not fun. I mean, like not even remotely. Like, I mean, it's cool that we documented it, you know, and like now we can celebrate this like experience.
Mhm.
But it when I think about that hunt, it is not fun. Like it was all I wanted. So
When
you can
I
watch the whole film on Meateater YouTube channel.
when I tell people the story, all the people in my life say, "Why didn't they just leave the goat?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Good question, Clay.
Well, we just didn't want to. That's as deep as it
Dedication.
goes.
Dedication.
It's as deep as it goes. But yeah, so that's the story. Should I take this off for the rest of the? Probably
It
should.
might be a little distracting,
Yeah.
you and that very handsome leafy suit.
If we can get it off.
Is that the same leafy suit that? Didn't I give you that leafy suit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh man, that's your leafy
I did.
suit.
You did. Well, I
Spend all my
but I got
money
you a
on
new
that.
one. I got you a
Save
new
up for
one though.
2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a First Light leafy top.
Isn't that what I got you for Father's Day?
And you spray painted it, son. You should be grounded. It's kind of funny that we had to talk about that, but I the Ellis Bell podcast to me is way more unique than a film like this.
Yeah.
For real. What you wouldn't know, again, like backstory. That was recorded with Ellis Bell last week. We sat on it for like
A day.
we worked on it the next day.
Yeah.
And produced it in 2 days.
Yep.
And it came out this week.
How did you find him?
The Arkansas Farm Bureau podcast called Agriculture. It's a regional Farm Bureau insurance podcast. Had done a podcast with Ellis Bell. And he actually told a lot of the same stories. And I meant to publicly thank the guys at Farm Bureau because they actually helped me get in touch with Ellis
Mhm.
Bell. Steve Eddington.
Yep.
And so big thanks to them. But I wouldn't have, I didn't know Ellis Bell. But when I heard him on their podcast, which there's a shorter,
Yeah.
I think it's a 2-part podcast.
15 minutes, I think.
Yeah, they do some cool stuff. I
Yeah.
listen to them, and they do some really cool stuff.
And they talked about him being part of the Arkansas Agricultural
Hall of
Hall
Fame.
of Fame.
And he's told some of the same stories he told us. But so that's how I knew him. That's how we
Mm.
met him.
You know, I love it when somebody can tell their own story. I think that's really valuable and unique, especially when it's in their own words and their own perspective. Because you lose that when, like, it's somebody else telling a first person account. And so hearing his, hearing the years in his voice and hearing
Yeah.
the history and like how he perceived things. I mean, it was really interesting.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
What stood out to you, Malachi?
Man, I think I was impacted by his mom. And the story about his mom getting her clothes on and going to help like the only white family in the in that region or
Yeah.
in that area.
Yeah.
And him being like, that's a white woman. Miss Jones is a white woman. And his mom looking at, she's a human being.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And how like at 87, he remembers that.
Yes.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And it
Yeah.
just, I don't know, real impacting to see how influential you as a parent
Yeah.
have on your children and
Yeah.
your response will shape them. Even like she probably didn't even think twice about that response,
Yeah.
right? Like totally forgot about it, but like that shaped his perception and how he saw people for the rest of his life. And for him to remember that, I just think it's super cool.
Well, and she did that in the early 1940s.
Yeah.
He was 4 or 5 years old, he
Yeah.
told us. And I mean, at probably the peak of the Jim Crow
Yeah,
era
yeah,
in the
yeah.
South.
Yeah.
And here this woman in the privacy of her own home with no
Yeah.
knowledge that this was going to be broadcast
Yeah.
83 years later,
Yeah.
that she did what she did.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a high level of character, I think.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That story to me was like it was a high point in it. And because of how much it impacted him,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, on the Farm Bureau podcast, I think Mr. Ellis like was almost crying when he told that story.
Yeah.
When I first heard it,
Yep.
because he told that story on their podcast too,
hmm
and yeah, that was something.
Yeah. So that was a good one. Also liked the story and how his pride could have gotten in the way
Yeah.
of the airplane.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the phrase that he used or you used around like, I just chose a different path.
The crop duster told him,
Yeah.
change your pattern.
Yeah. Change your pattern. And I just thinking it's I don't know. I am, there's been a few times, say in the last year, that I've gotten to sit and listen to older men talk about their lives and their journey. And there's something like super, I mean, the word I'll use is like sweet and genuine when a guy towards the end of their life can look back and like see a story and grab a principle and like cherish that principle and be willing to like give it to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And so like that principle of like, man, just change your pattern. Like you don't have to be right. You don't have to like
Yeah.
prove your point. Just change your pattern and like you'll stay in the up and up. I know I value older men who have processed things. And whether it was right or wrong, right, what they've gone through and being able to package in a way that's exportable to other people and being willing to export it to other people without some sort of token or reward back.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's just I like that change of pattern.
Man, he had the kind of the architectural stories of his life on a nice little platter. And again, I knew that because Josh was the one who did that interview. And you didn't necessarily like team up like, hey, tell us what you told them.
No, not at all.
Not at all. I mean, there was no reference to that. And he told those same stories. It's like, these are key moments. When I was 5 years old, I saw this sharecropper crying. And it's almost like that informed him of like, oh, there's some injustice in the world. I mean, a 4-year-old boy knew that this grown man crying, it impacted him. And then when he heard why, I mean, it obviously wasn't until he was an adult that he understood a bigger picture of really what was happening. But he remembered it. The stuff with his mother, the airplane. He just had so many just little nuggets that he could just like tell the story on. But Misty, what stood out to you?
Well, I think, as I was listening to it, it's just so interesting. It's kind of like what Malachi said, hearing people talk about their story. These are things that like we study. I teach a class that we talk about the Great Migration and the social impact that had for people. But to hear someone, we study the impacts of integration on kids' test scores and on in college. That's what we did. And I worked for a department that looked at that from a public policy perspective. But then to hear someone who went through it share it, it's just a very different animal. And I think it solidifies those experiences. And what you're talking about when you think about memories and stuff, you think about the way that people process information is you fit it inside of a category of information you already know. And so we know the history on this stuff. We've read the books, we've talked to people, and so we're fitting that into a paradigm based on we know how these things end. We know where they're at right now. We know we've been able to extrapolate ideas about how these decisions were made. And this guy was experiencing it firsthand, just experiencing the emotions of it, what he could see, how he felt about his mom being wrapped up real tight, going out into the roads. Just hearing him describe that, his mom, how she was dressed that night and how she was, and how he couldn't sleep because of what he was thinking about. I just thought it was very meaningful to hear him share that story and hear it from not what we already know, not from what the history books say, but hear it firsthand from the sights, the sounds, the experiences of a 5-year-old boy.
He touched on two things that I think many people would be familiar with, but to personalize the story. And number one was the Great Migration, which are so many factors. I mean, we just touched, we didn't go into it, but people leaving the South, which he is you get the sense that he saw that happening and he didn't want to go. He wanted to stay here and make it here. And he built a life that did that. The second thing was that he saw and brought out which is, I don't know if it's controversial. It feels controversial, but about how desegregation and integration was difficult on Black communities.
Yeah.
Like to hear him say that, like he wasn't talking from an academic perspective. Like he wasn't like quoting some author he'd read about in a book. He saw it. He grew up in these communities and watched them disintegrate. What did you think about that?
I mean, as Missy said, like I knew that. Like I've researched that and I've seen the data and around how that did have an impact on the number of Black teachers, the number of Black administrators, the number of Black leaders, and how it really did have it had an impact. So it was interesting to hear somebody's first person perspective about it. And I think it kind of, it makes me think about just like the impact of policy.
Yeah.
Right. Something that somebody once told me, like when I was going through grad school, is like, if you want to ever like be a part of policy making, the best thing that you can do is like, think of your policy, but walk 10, 15 years in the future and then walk backwards and like think about like what did your policy
impacts.
Adjust? Like what did it touch? Who is winning? Who is losing?
Yeah.
And it makes me think about how, policies, and when I say policies, I'm just thinking about what are the words, edicts, structures, systems that you're built to help govern society. That's when I think about policy. Like it's messy, right? And you can have like the best intentions.
Right.
Of, oh man, I see this injustice. We should do this policy and this will fix it.
Yeah.
Right? But it's just messy, right? Because I think it just continued to kind of make that a reality for me of like policy, even though with the best intentions, it might have adverse impacts.
Yeah.
And it will touch people's lives. And I don't have like a solution to that, but it's just the reality.
Well, do you remember Mr. Earl Jasper, who we had on the Mississippi River episode, who I asked him about integration? And it's almost like sometimes policy impacts generations differently.
Yeah.
Because, like, generations later, it obviously was better for these people.
Yeah.
But maybe that generation that took it right in the face, it was like super tough.
Well, and I think you've got to kind of clarify a couple things. I think there's integration, and integration was good and necessary. Like there's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
People couldn't drink from water fountains in public places. That, American citizens could not drink from public water fountains, the same water fountain. That policy needed to change. But that wasn't the only thing that was changing. And so the implementation of that idea that people should have equal access to things. I remember, and this has been almost 15 years ago, and I was in Fort Smith, and I was interviewing a woman who lived through that. And I've heard this both ways, because I've talked with a good friend of mine who was bused in it was, I think, Michigan. He was bused to his school. And he would say being able to be bused to that high quality school, he was a black guy, a black teenager was bused to what had previously been an all white school. And he says, like, made all the difference in the world in his life, having access to that high quality school. So that, and their busing is controversial as a policy, but he would say that was the difference maker for him. I was talking to this woman in Fort Smith, and she was saying, the integration of schools came as a result of the separate but equal doctrine, that we'll have separate schools, but they'll be equal. And they were not equal. They were not equally funded. They were not equally resourced. And she said they should have just funded us. That was her perspective, is they should have just, because when they integrated the schools, they didn't say, hey, anyone can go to any school. They said, the kids at the black school can now come to the white school. And for some people, that would have been a great solution. But one of the unintended consequences that I don't think people realized would happen is that they would lose their black leaders in the school. There wouldn't necessarily be a place for them at the school. That kids would get targeted and are what's the word I'm looking for, Malachi, when they put you in a lower level class?
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
I'm having a blank out. So they wouldn't let those kids in the AP classes. And so there would be kind of like this subtle tracking. That's what it is. So there would be this subtle segregation within the school. So it's tricky because you don't want to say integration was a bad thing. It is wrong to say people can't have access to the same things. But there are unintended consequences, and there were for those communities and how they...
Well, and I think even aside from understanding even the details, just hearing him say what he said, like I didn't even need the VO being voiceover. I didn't need to like expound on it. Just like hearing him say that, it just gives you a different perspective.
Yeah.
And I think that's all. That's what a story like this does. Is it just gives you a different perspective on it. That's really powerful and just kind of tells the story itself.
Yeah.
But Bear, Josh, what's that to you?
I was just going to say, listening to you guys, after spending time with him, I spent a grand total of like 3.5 hours with him. The one thing that you pick up on, and I think it's communicated in the podcast, is the fact that, there was some incredible generational continuance from his mother and father to him, because you see it in the fact that even though this man endured significant challenges and in segregation, in discrimination, there's no air of embitterment in him. Like he's not an embittered man, or there's no sense that he's a victim. Like he in no way does he carry this victim mentality. He does recognize the challenges that were there, but what it did is it filled him with determination and drive and a sense of like, I'm going to be the best that I can be and not let any of this stuff hold me back.
Yeah.
And
that's hard to do.
That's incredibly hard to do, but I don't know that he would have had that without the input from his mother and his father. And hearing those stories of even like his dad going to get the loan from the bank and then going to see the Lindsay boys. And I mean, those things showed him the way that you could navigate life and still be successful.
He said it. He said, I didn't spend much time worrying about what people wanted me to do or not do.
Yeah.
Which was somehow he was able to like not let the status of the country
dictate who he's going to be.
And I think that would be hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's like he didn't focus on the issues. He focused on his destination.
Yeah.
And
the guy, I mean, the story he tells is a phenomenal story. Yeah. I mean, just from going to, I mean,
in the back of a wagon.
Poverty. I mean, just in the back of a wagon.
Yep.
To the success that he had. I mean, and granted, I mean, I'm talking partially about just like career and financial success, which there's a lot of ways to evaluate success, which he would as well. But I mean, just an incredible story.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to even think about the technology of him riding in a wagon. I mean, in the 1940s, 4 decades after the Model T was born, they're riding around in wagons pulled by mules.
Yeah.
And then him being a pilot an instrument rated airplane that he could fly at night, fly all over the country.
He bought his airplane in 1972, and it's the airplane he still has today.
Oh,
and he
wow.
just takes immaculate care of it.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah. Bear, what stood out to you?
I think first off, I really like this like style of Bear Grease podcast where you're just like, it's like an interview with one person just about like their whole life.
Nice.
And like something like this, like, you know, like he condensed like 87 years of his life into like these like key points, these key moments, some like core memories and stuff. And like, you know, like you can get all that in like 1 hour. So that was the first thing I thought was, you know, just like from like a Bear Grease podcast perspective. I like the story style podcast.
Nice podcast critique.
Yep.
Yeah.
But then I think one of the big points that I thought was interesting was like you started out the beginning of the podcast with him talking about how like people would go up to the north and they'd come back with like these new cars.
Yeah.
And like even from like such a young age, like he never viewed the, you know, like the new cars as success, or that was never his like driving force, was the material things. But then like you see like, you know, throughout his career, he acquired all that stuff anyway, just through like kind of like living that life, or like the what's the verse that talks about like the, you know, like your heart, everything flows from the heart. It was like his heart wasn't after the material things. It wasn't after big success, but it all kind of came with just that like heart posture that he lived with throughout his whole life.
Yeah.
They were just kind of additional
to
things.
him, success was a constant path of progression. You know what I mean? It wasn't this, when I get this, that will be success. Like he just always felt at the next level he needed to keep going.
Yeah, it was like the material things were like a byproduct of like his true like goals and progression in his career. So that was the main thing. But yeah, I thought that it was very interesting how well he like remembered his childhood, like how clear those memories were to him and how well he described them.
Yeah.
Was really interesting to see him at like 87 years old talking about all those things.
Yeah.
So yeah, overall, I thought it was a good podcast.
He's a good storyteller.
Yeah.
Like he knew, and I mean, these are stories he's told 100 times, I'm sure, but like it carried a good story. You don't realize it when you're spellbound under the story, but it's carrying a set of values and knowledge that the storyteller is trying to impart. And his stories did that.
Yeah.
You know, they were just like, they did it. They were poignant, you know, and that's pretty rare.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty rare to sit down with somebody. And, you know, I mean, like we said, he was interviewed for like 3 hours and you heard about 40 minutes of him talking. And so obviously this didn't encompass the whole man's life, but it's just kind of what made sense for what we had. I bet there wasn't a person that listened to the podcast that didn't smile when they heard him telling the coon hunting story.
Oh, yeah.
Did you,
Oh, man.
Malachi?
He was in tears laughing so hard telling that story. He's like, it's the scariest night of my life.
Yeah, he's
Did
a
you
good
smile when you heard it, Bear?
Yeah, I did. And
Did you,
at that
Misty?
point,
yeah, I laughed
I
out
was like
loud.
listening to it while I was working on a bow. I like really couldn't even hear what he was saying, but it was just how hard he was laughing was like funny.
I feel his pain. For real. I've gone coon hunting with you, and it's like, where are we going? We want to go over there
In the middle of the night.
You know, like, you serious? I don't hear no dogs
he
anymore.
Said, them coons was falling out of them trees. Oh, that was so good. That story was like a minute long.
Yeah.
It was so short, but it was just so funny because he thought it was so funny. You know, I had to include that. But obviously, he wasn't like a big hunter. You know, but that was so funny. Malachi, second favorite. Anything else stand out to you?
Yeah, I was trying to think about some of the other things. You know, I really appreciated the story about him going to that
The
shareholders meeting.
Oh yeah,
and
the
like
Monsanto.
You know, like immediately being like faced with resistance, and then something inside of him saying like, "Talk,
Yeah.
say something," and how like that there's a response to him saying something. I don't know. I think that's like a powerful thing because we live in a society where like people might say something like online,
Yeah.
right? But like never in a place of
Right.
where like your words you have to stand by your words. You
Right.
standing up in a shareholders meeting, you can't shrink back behind like a cover name or
Anonymity.
what, you know what I mean? You gotta like, this is what I believe. And I just appreciated that aspect of him where he recognized this is a moment where I can like say what I see, and because the CEO responded, you knew there was a level of truth to what he
Right.
was saying, right? If he would have stand up and said something that was like outlandish, the CEO would have been like, sit down.
Yeah.
But like because he was like on the mark
Mm.
of like, I see all this, but why aren't you supporting black schools?
Yeah.
And I just appreciate people who can recognize the moment it's time to say something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then having the capacity to like implement what they said. I think that's, some people can stand up and say
Yeah.
something, but it takes a real guy or a lady to be able to take that vision of what you're saying
Yeah.
and like implement it inside of
Yeah.
everyday life.
And I mean, obviously, the story is so much more complex than what was told. I mean, it
Yeah.
essentially went from the CEO having a 2-hour conversation with him to him creating Bell Ag Tech, which has been around for like I think I said 20 years, and has
Yeah.
helped all these kids go to school.
Fun facts. I know someone. I mean, I'm 90% sure because I was listening when they were talking about that because of how he described it. I thought, I know someone who went to one of this ag outreach program that was in one of the schools over there in the Delta, and he ended up going to Pine Bluff, graduating. He is a very successful business owner here in Northwest Arkansas now. And if I said the name of the business, everybody would know what it was. Everyone from
Do you
around
think
here.
he went to
I mean, I
Mr.
remember them.
Ellis's
Yes, they
through his program somehow?
they would talk about that basically. Oh no, he got hooked up with this ag outreach program to help young black kids go to become get involved in
it
agriculture.
worked.
Yeah, and it's interesting because he's not actually in an ag field, but because of that was kind of a stepping stone for him
Yeah.
to get connected to something else.
awesome.
Yeah,
I going back to like the components of the story when Mr. Ellis said, and the CEO stood straight up.
yeah,
He was a big, tall guy.
yeah. He's a good storyteller.
Yeah.
And you didn't know what was about to happen. You were just like, is he going to tell him to sit down and shut up? And he says, I want to talk to you. And then you still don't really know, like, is he going to get in trouble, or is he going to, and then the story goes on. That was so good. That was so good. Monsanto being now when I hear the name Monsanto, I hear Dr. Newcomb's got to head out. Yeah, she's so important. She has things she has to do. When I hear Monsanto, I think of like big bad corporate. What are we doing here?
Let's just mute her.
Okay, I hear big bad corporate ag. But anyway, sounds like I don't know much about them, but that word to me is usually a negative thing. Here it was a positive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a great story. I mean, a man who's made the most of his life. Those are people to be just honored and emulated.
Mm-hmm.
I think people can hear his story and use those characters and qualities and not have to do things the hard way when you hear someone who's actually already journeyed through difficult times. You can glean things to apply to your own life that keep you from having to do that. And I think this is a great story that fits that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Makes you want to pull stuff from older people.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It just makes you want to sit down and like, tell me that. Because when you're young, like when you're a teenager or high school, like, and you're around older family members, like you don't recognize the value of like what they have.
Yeah.
Of like, let me hear about your story. Like, tell me more about when you moved to Alabama and bought a farm. You know what I mean? Like you don't, and that's any crop of life, any race.
That's why it's such a blessing when someone lives into their late 80s and is still really competent and able to really tell a story, because 20 years, like I think about my grandparents. Like, what if I, at age 17, had interviewed my grandfather, Lewin Newcomb, about his life? I mean, right now, it just seems like such a miss. It's like, what were we thinking that we didn't put a video camera in front of this guy and talk to him? But nobody did that kind of stuff.
Nope.
And so it's, it's like 20 years after something is gone, do you realize that you should have done it? And that's the beauty of these older people that are still really able to talk. Because, I mean, what if a guy like Ellis Bell had only lived into his 70s? We wouldn't be doing this podcast.
It's true.
Like, his long life
Yep.
is what made us be like, oh, this has extreme value. We need to capture this, and that doesn't happen. So, yeah, so we needed to start interviewing people that we don't think are very interesting. And then maybe 20 years from now, they will be.
It's funny.
That'll be a new business model.
Yeah.
Oh, that's our new business model. Let's build a business for 20 years from now by doing
Know
all
someone
these
boring?
interviews.
Let us interview them.
Yeah. Who do you think you aren't going to care a bit about tomorrow? We want to talk to them.
Christy had the forethought right before her grandmother died. She was like 92 to just sit down with her for 30, 45 minutes and say, Grandma, just tell us about your life. And it's really valuable. I mean,
did she record it?
Yeah, audio recording.
Why isn't this a Bear Grease podcast?
Well, it probably ought to be.
Didn't she live in a dirt house with a dirt floor in southeast
Her first two
Oklahoma?
houses had dirt floors. She helped her husband cut wood for a living. I mean, she was an incredible, incredible woman. Yeah. Oma Vaughn.
Oma Vaughn.
Yep.
Made the best cat head biscuits in southeast Oklahoma.
Yep.
Is that right?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Next Bear Grease podcast.
There you go.
Yep. Malachi, how do you think we handled the material? This is always real tricky to me.
I almost, when I listened to it, I almost texted you because I thought you hit it on the head when you said Southerners valued the individual black person, but didn't value or despise the race. And Northerners despise the individual, but love the race. I mean, it's true,
Yeah.
And I think that was the first time I've ever heard it articulated. I know that that's the reality. I've read the books, I've done all the stuff. And I just think I appreciate, like, at least talking about it. I saw something today and I thought it was a good, like, capture. This post talking about, like, engaging in policy discussions, and it said, like, they have two mottos when they go into a room and try to develop a policy. The first motto is, like, name the elephant in the room, right? And
what's that mean?
Well, it's like, name the thing that you don't want to talk about. Like, name the biggest.
Okay, if you're making a policy.
Yeah, if you're making a policy.
Gotcha.
Like, let's talk about the elephant in the room.
Gotcha.
What's the elephant in the room? The second is, like, embrace the cactus. Like, talk about the things that are a little prickly, right? And if you're able to do that, you're able to, like, move forward and make a good policy. And I just think race is still an elephant in the room in, like, our country. And I just think being able to engage and talk about the prickly stuff, I think it's something that we all need to do, because it's only like when you really have to engage and face, does it, like, really provide you with the mirror of, like, do I think like that? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, do I have a little bit of that mentality? And, I appreciate people who have a platform and do it in a respectful way. And I just think you did, like, even the subtleties of like, if you hear me out, some of the things you said, like, if you hear me out, if you allow me to be vulnerable with you, if you allow me to say it this way.
I was nervous as heck. Josh would tell you. I mean, it's like this fell in our laps in a way. Like, I wasn't trying to, like, make a podcast about race in America. I mean, it's not even a very good time. I mean, it doesn't sound to me like a great time to even be talking about that. So it wasn't like this was calculated.
Yeah.
I also learned well, I mean, I knew this, but it wasn't calculated that this is Black History Month,
Yeah.
February. Like we got access to this guy. We went and did it, and we made this. And I was nervous as a cat.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a hunting podcast. We could talk about killing deer.
Yeah.
Like, we don't have to tread on this kind of stuff, but I love it because to me it's interesting. To me, it's the kind of conversations that just make you think about your own self. I think, and in journalism there's something that I don't understand, but I'm trying to navigate through it. Is like when you just say something that's true, that's really not your opinion, but it's kind of edgy. For instance, like when I described how I lived in Arkansas my whole life, just like Mr. Bell.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a common story in that we're both from Arkansas.
Yeah.
And I lived in a place where there were no Black people.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, like literally, like, and here he lived in a place that was primarily Black.
Yeah.
And and when I tell people about Arkansas, I sometimes tell them that just because it's interesting, and it still kind of blows my mind sometimes of how geographically we have still segregated in a way. And that sounds wild even saying that, as risky as it is to talk about this stuff, but it's like, this is just the truth.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's something that we all know is true. We ought to be able to at least acknowledge it and talk about it. But I don't know. I mean, I love that we can have these kind of discussions.
Yeah, I think they're beneficial. I think they are. I think they're beneficial to have them, and being able to talk about them with your friends, with your family, with your kids, with your children. I think that's one of the reasons. Like, my oldest goes fishing with Josh. Right? Like,
wait a minute. He doesn't like fishing better than squirrel hunting, though, does he?
I don't know. He caught 2.
He caught 2 fish.
And if you
I got him hooked, if you know what I mean.
And if you ask him,
now that I will politic against. I'll be like, "Hey man, fishing losers."
If you ask him, they'd be like, "Hey, I heard you caught a fish." He'd be like, "I caught 2. I'll let you know, I caught 2." But like I want them, my boys, to not like be defined by their race, right?
Yeah.
I purposely put them in situations that society might tell them like, that might not be your lane. You know what I mean? And it's just a way that it's preparing me to like be able to talk about the realities of society in which we live. Because we go to the golf course, and I am, probably one of 2 Black people at the golf course, but like it provides a space to talk about that with my boys and with my wife. And, I just think there's more people that need to have that level of strategic interaction inside of this space. And you got a platform to do it. So you did talk about coon hunting. So you
Mr. Ellis did.
Yeah, you checked off the box.
Yeah,
I think his
honey,
story.
this was a hunting podcast.
Well, his
clearly.
story. We talk of the tagline for the podcast is "Find relevance in things forgotten," and
Yep.
And then the last line is to tell stories of people who live their lives close to the land.
Oh, Mr. Bell.
Yep, he did it.
No doubt. No doubt. Well, hey, this has been fun. A lot of fun.
Yeah.
A lot of fun. Thanks for coming, Malachi.
Oh yeah, I'll be back
Bear.
when that check clears again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, until next time. Is there anything else we're supposed to tell people before?
I think we got it.
We got Bear Newcomb's got 2 films coming out in the next couple of weeks
On
that'll be on the
YouTube.
Meateater YouTube. That Bear's on. It's me and Bear together. So it's not. They're really good. Bear hunting.
Both of them.
I'm looking forward to it. It's gonna be good.
Yeah, and we've been. By the time you watch those films, most of those bears would have already been eaten.
We had
True.
at our camp. We had mountain goat
And bear meat.
burgers, mountain goat and bear meat. It was
Yep.
great.
Yep. It was great. All right, keep the wild places wild because that's where the bears.